I am so grateful that Represent Justice was able to bring us all together to have this conversation. We try to be really intentional when we talk about restorative and transformative justice, that we are ensuring that we're talking to the people who are not just living experiences, but doing the work. So, Sam Carwin, she, her, hers, welcome to our 2026 Week of Action. I'm going to start with Naya. You're already off mute. If you can share your name, your pronoun, and why do you do justice work, and then we'll pass to Eddie.
Well, my name is Naya Kenny, she, her pronouns. I am based in Atlanta. I do justice work. Um, Honestly, for me, the choice to care deeply about another person's safety is the same choice that I bring to justice work. In like justice spaces today. So, just the center care over punishment.
Thank you. Go ahead, Eddie.
Hello, my name is Eddie Ellis. My pronoun is he, him, and I do justice work because I was impacted by the system as a child. And I understand how important it is for us to protect our children. I want to be someone on the front line, making sure that our children get the things they deserve and not punishment, but love and support.
Thank you for that. I think that's a great
Oh,
idea
we
of how do
forgot.
we, pardon, sorry.
I'm
Go
so
ahead, Naya.
sorry. I'm like, Eddie, that was like, I totally forgot to mention like, yeah, I was directly impacted as well. That's what pushed me to do this work.
Both. I think that's an important framework to have, right? So justice work is about protecting, love, support, care. All of that is part of what it means to care for individuals and to push forward for justice. There's two documentaries that you each individually were part of, On These Grounds and Change is Possible. They both expose harm and the power of community. What, Naya, since you're off mute, I'll have you go first. What felt most important to you about telling your story? What did you want the audience to feel?
Um, so for me, storytelling, it invites the listeners, the viewers into somebody else's lived world. So it's one thing to describe a law, but another thing to feel what it was like to experience it. Um, the audience to unlearn this narrative of students in class being um, just being punished for lack of better terms, being a student. I wanted people to see that there are different, deeper layers to youth, and that these youth aren't always just, or excuse me, brown and black girls aren't always just having attitudes, or they aren't always moving with malice. They could be going through a whole lot of stuff, and so I think that's really what pushes me to continue to tell my story.
Thank you for that. There's always layers to a story, what we see in front of a camera, and then the reality of what people are walking into a situation with. Eddie, can you share also that same question? What did you want the audience to feel? And also, as an individual sharing your lived experience, what does it look like to reclaim your own story?
Well, thank you for that question. I think for me, a change is possible. My documentary is a spinoff of my book that I wrote about my life and showing that I could change. And that change is actually possible when giving people a chance. But I also wanted to show in the documentary and have conversation with folks that's in the community that we don't have to treat our children that way. There's other alternatives to quote unquote punishment for children, but we don't have to be punitive. There's other community resources that we can put children in, and think outside the box when it comes to addressing our children and problems they may have, but also looking at the system and the systematic things that happen to children and push them in these situations most of the time. Because I tell people, a person that's hungry don't steal bread to sell it; they steal a bread to eat it. Right. So when you see some of these children acting out, it's not always that they want to act out. It's something else that's an underlying thing that's happening with these children. And I just wanted to explore having conversations on how we as a community can come together and recognize the importance of our children and what we can do collectively to support our children to be successful and feel loved and safe in our communities.
Thank you. Thank you. So, really, what I hear in that is part of what our definition of loving engagement is connecting with the context. So, it's not just this looking at the facts or the information, but let's connect with the context that's going on for young people. Thinking about that, being rooted in lived experience, loving engagement is about context, is about care, is about compassion. What does that mean to you personally? And how does it shape the way that you show up in justice spaces when you think about loving engagement? And Eddie, I'll have you go first on this one.
Thank you. That's a really, really good question. I think for me, it's recognizing that something else can be done outside of punishment. It's recognizing the humanity in people and recognizing that as a community, we can come together and do more to support people and make sure resources are there to support people, especially our children. When we're talking about our children who are growing, they're like a mold, right? And they need to be molded and helped, in society. So what can we do as adults to support those children outside of giving them the resources, loving them, protecting them, making sure they have the things they need to be successful, but also giving them space to be children and understanding that children will make bad decisions at times, but don't make them horrible people. They're just children who made a bad choice. And I think as adults, if we love on our children and protect them, we can help them as they work through these things, and that's what it means to me.
Thank you. Thank you. Naya, what are you
Mm.
thinking about when you hear loving engagement and doing justice work?
For me, love and engagement, it just simply means standing with people in their full complexity. When I spoke up in that classroom that day, I wasn't really thinking about policies, but like you said, humanity. And like I said, the choice to care about people and their safety is that's the choice that I bring to these justice spaces today. About centering care over punishment.
All right. So, Naya, your story started in the school, and we are Black Lives Matter at school. We want not only our students, but our educators, our admins, our whole system really wrapping around students. So, what does that look like? How can educators practice that idea of loving engagement, showing up, recognizing people's full complexity, coming together for the kids, like Eddie mentioned? What are the actual specifics? What's something you would suggest for tangible ways within this system that is often resistant to change?
To treat behavior as an unfinished product and more as a moment in development, for students. And I think that is major because like we keep saying, they are holding these Black youth to these extremely high standards, adult standards, and I just feel like young people are learning, they're healing, and they are changing. And we need a system that reflects that potential.
What are you thinking, Eddie? What are the tangible ways that you see educators really showing loving engagement within a resistant system?
Well, I can tell you if I can reflect on, going to school in Washington, D.C., and I remember my teacher, who's a Black woman, came in the classroom and she said, "Have any of you all rode horses before?" And
Mm.
everybody said no. And she said, "Well, I just came from a horse stable and it was all white kids there, no Black kids that was in the training. And would you all like to do that?" And we were like, "Yeah." And like three of us actually learned how to ride horses. And to us, she was thinking outside the box. But as children, we wasn't thinking that way. She did healing circles for us as children. She did circles for us to be able to understand what our classmates are going through. And at the time, I didn't understand it. But as I got older and started reading more about restorative practices and healing circles, I said, "That this is what our teacher was doing back then," and we didn't even realize that as children.
We
So
didn't
I just
realize.
think it's just thinking outside the box and make sure we're protecting our children. Bring more social emotional programs inside the schools as well. You know, teach children, especially a lot of the male children, that it's okay to be vulnerable and to say I love you. Because as a boy growing up, I didn't hear that a lot from a lot of the males in my family. So I make
Mm-hmm.
sure as a father now that I tell my sons that I love them. I tell my uncles that I love them. So I'm trying to break my uncles out of, unlearning what your father didn't tell you, right? Who showed you in ways of financial and putting food on the table and a house over your head, but to actually say it, to verbalize it, right? And that's what I had from my teachers, that and I look back and I say, I love the teachers that I had and I was blessed to have because I dealt with, dyslexia as a child. I still deal with it. And I didn't understand it. And I always felt like I was different, but didn't know why and how. And my
Mm-hmm.
teachers told me, everybody's different in ways and everybody's special. But this is what
Mm-hmm.
you can do to try to help yourself understand these things. And it meant a whole lot to me because the shame that I dealt with, and I acted out at times because of that shame, because I didn't have the tools to express exactly what I was dealing with and why am I seeing some things different and filtering some things different as a child. And so it's very important to me now to make sure when I talk to children who have, deal with dyslexia, that it's nothing wrong with you. You just learn different. You just receive information different, and if we prepare ourselves in different ways, we can get where we need to go. And that's what my teachers did for me. And that's what I think is very important.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not going to say I know your age because, black don't crack. But I will say to think about horses and animals and engaging in that is something now that we're seeing all across the US as a way to support people in their social emotional learning. So to think that this educator was doing it before it was cool is what I usually say, before the mainstream, just shows a level of dedication that that teacher had to learn and to figure out what's going to work for my kids in my room, which is always what we want. And so we talk about this idea of restorative justice, but really, oftentimes it's about we're not giving grace. So, Naya, you talk about that in your documentary and with your statements today. So, how does that look? How can we uplift this idea of restorative practices with the foundation being having grace for our young people?
Muted. I need like a little second to think about that. How can you ask the question one more time?
Course. So we talk about this idea of restorative practices and justice work, but how do we think about that with the foundation being grace? How do we change our way that we're approaching it, knowing that, like you mentioned, Black and Brown girls really aren't given that idea of grace in the classroom or in their everyday lives? Times when we talk about restorative practices and this idea of justice, we're talking about, like you mentioned, the restorative circle. But we know that young people are really just being denied grace, not given the opportunity to act like children, giving expectations that are unrealistic, calling their questioning sass. These are the things that we know. So if we approach justice from a place of grace, what would that look like? How can we think about restorative justice through that lens?
Oh wow! I think just a big circle of people listening to each other, especially when we talk about children, And sometimes as parents, we think we know what our children need instead of listening to them, right? So it can be both and, right? My children, my son, my youngest say, "Dad, I need these things," and I say, "Okay, here's how we can achieve those things, right? Here's how I can help you, right?" And that's what I think is not happening in a lot of places. We see children quote unquote acting up, right? And we're not getting to the bottom of what's happening again with these children. Some children are coming to
Right.
school where they're hungry, right? Some children come to school where they didn't get any sleep the night before. Some are coming to school and they lost a friend or a family member the night before or that day, and they still have to come to school. So some kids were harmed in different ways, and we're not listening to these young people. I just think it's important
Mm.
for adults to be able to listen to these young people in order for us to adequately support them in the way that they want to move in this world. And it's important that we look back in history, and it shows us if we're able to listen to the young people that we're supporting, we're able to support a growing future. But if we're not able to listen to them, we're hindering them from being their best that they can be in their life and being afraid to ask for help and support. And I think in these restorative practices, it helps people understand that. Let me sit back with this talking piece and let me listen. And let me hear what this young person's saying, right? And let us respond as a community in love and support to this young person and not with anger and with daggers in our eyes, right? Or with energy that's saying all these young people. And I tell people, it comes off. Energy is transferable, right? So if I'm coming to these children with these young people, again, all of them the same type of attitude, guess what? They feel these things. They sense that you're really not for them. So that's create a space where we can support our young people in all ways, especially emotionally, because if we emotionally support our kids, educationally, they're able to do more things. But if they're not supported, It's going to be really hard for them to do the things they need to do while they're in school, while they're trying to grow, while they're trying to mature in ways and in children ways as they go to an adult. So that's how I see it. You on mute, Sam.
You muted, Sam.
Thank you for that, Eddie. That made me think of something. And Naya, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. That idea of energy being transferable. When I talk, when I train, I ask educators, how are you coming into the classroom? What mood are you in? What trigger does this kid have for you? Not the kid themselves, but what I'm bringing in, my own history. And we saw that video, right? There was a mood, there was a tone, there was an energy in the room that he walked in with. There was a stillness that other students were feeling, right? So when you think about the work that you do, Naya, and the ways that you support young people, how do you talk to them about just the presence that they're having, the way that they're showing up, and the ways that other people are showing up, and how to balance that out? I would love to hear your thoughts on the energy idea, the vibes, as the kids say.
The vibes, yeah, that is actually amazing. For me, when I'm working with my youth, we we center grounding, of course, because like you said, people are always coming into these spaces with this weird feeling that, going through with them, going through whatever. Um,
Grounding itself is words, right? So it's giving
right.
me a second to process how I am feeling. That is
Mhm.
huge because we run from classroom to classroom, from experience to experience. So I think really just in doing a grounding exercise, I'm helping you shake off whatever energy you're bringing into a space and then enter the
I'm
space and
shaking
be here
off.
with us.
And in that same breath, I get to shake off whatever I came into this space with.
It's mutual, which is what we want for our kids, right? Part of this work
Exactly.
is that we aren't just, I hate the empty cup, right? I'm not just pouring into them, but we're in relationship with them. Eddie, your story challenges the idea that people are beyond redemption. How can we lean into transformative justice and thinking about the relationship, thinking about what's after, right? When we're on the other side.
I appreciate that question. And I tell people what's very important for me is proximity. Becoming proximate to someone who have experienced some of these things and get to know them for who they are and not for the worst thing they may be judged for in their life, right? And I told people, going to prison at the age of 16, and I spent 10 years in solitary confinement, 6 years in the highest level prison in the United States. And when I came home in 2006, I didn't know what I was going to do. I just wanted to do right.
Mm-hmm.
And I reflected back on the rules and regulations and the love that my grandparents and parents gave me, you know, and it meant a whole lot to me. Even my teachers that the stuff they gave me. But at this time now, I can receive it. I don't have them blinders on. I can go back. I remember when they said this to me. Now I can
Mm-hmm.
receive it, as a grown person. But I knew that I can change despite of my environment. And those dehumanizing environments are not conducive of people really changing if you're not changing yourself. Because the environment itself, prison, will not change you; it will destroy you. And I just leaned on my ancestors and my prayers and what I wanted to do for myself. I wanted to show people that I can be a different person. And I have the honor of working with people across the country who are the prison as children, who've come home, who are doing awesome work, a lot of restorative work in their communities, in their families, their mothers, their fathers, their grandparents. And for me, I like to show people that it's possible. But it's not just coming out of prison that you change. Every day we're changing something, whether it's the way we might go to work, the way we eat in the day. We have friends and family who have dealt with addiction or something, and they are changing. So give me the opportunity to be present in front of you and show you that this almost 20 years I've been home, that I've changed my life, and all I've been trying to do with restorative practices in different ways is give back to my community, help people grow, help people find jobs that's going to adequately help them pay their bills and live their life, but also teaching people how to give to themselves, to say no sometimes, right? To be radical and say, you know what? I don't want to do nothing today. I just want to rest. And that's what I've learned, and fortunately I have a wife that's very supportive And she allows me to do that. She supports me in that, and I'm able to do that in her presence, and it makes me feel so good, to be a father, to be a husband, to be someone that's in the space, that's being an example of change, right? And not just saying it, but showing it. But I don't want to see our children have to continue to go through this, to be harmed, to don't have the adequate educational opportunities, the resources in the house. Their parents don't have the resources. And then the system is saying that these people are wrong, but never pointing the finger back at itself and saying, I'm creating these environments for these things to fester. So, but it's possible. And there's many of us who are showing that change is possible by our actions every day and what we're doing inside our communities, inside the schools, religious buildings, and wherever else.
Thank you for that. What I heard is something that I often do in education, which is start with the goal. Like, what do you want? We can't transform people. We can't build this different world if we don't actually have conversations of what do you want? And then how do we help you get there? That's what I heard. And what you were saying is taking the time to listen and recognize people want stability. People want to not be incarcerated. So how do we help them? How do we support them? We say within one of our principles, restorative and transformative justice, that we're dedicated to restoring and transforming ourselves and the world around us. And then we can dismantle these punitive systems and build healing really in its place. About the relationships that you build in your program, how do we reframe accountability about relationships and community support? So when things are taking place in your program, when young people are making choices that wouldn't be the choice that you make, how do you frame that? Not in a sense of you did something wrong and you individually need to be held accountable, but how can we talk from a place of relationship and community and ultimately providing support?
From a place of community, the conversation shifts from you did something wrong to, well, what's going on with you? Do you need anything? And it just, like you say, comes from just a place of support rather than a place of punishment.
Eddie, you've been around for a minute. You've been doing this transformative restorative justice, and you talked about the wonderful opportunity you had to be exposed to these ideas early on. What do you think about when you've seen approaches, not just here in the US, but what is that global perspective of justice and healing circles and talking sticks? How do you see that differently for not just us in the US, but thinking about a global idea of justice?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. As we know, indigenous people across the world has been doing these things for centuries, and we are just as a country is trying to, get on board with these things. But I think it's a power in it because it shifts, like you say, the blame on a person and bring it to the community and allow the community to support the person and the community take this on and see how we can help. We can be a resource to the people with, transforming and healing something that was broken. And as we know, we have some cultures that when you harm someone, you may have to give a cow up to replace this or something else up to replace something that was taken and that was harmed. And the reality of this is this: when you learn to be accountable for your people in your community, it makes all of us a part of what happened, right? And when we come together to make sure people are supported and have the resource they help that they need, right? It makes the community flourish more, and that's why these systems try to reduce resources in places because they know resources help these things, break people up, don't bring people together. But as we come together, globally and see people coming from different countries coming to the US, people in the US going to different countries and being a part of these circle practices and learning, a lot of the things these indigenous people have been doing for centuries is so helpful, and I think for me, the harm that I caused going to prison as a 16-year-old, someone lost their life. And it's nothing that I can do to atone for that other than dealing with myself and apologizing and taking full responsibility for what happened and honoring his family and honoring him and also honoring my family in that process. But through that process, I wasn't alone with my healing. While I was in prison, when I came home, I had a community of people there helping me. And this is what we need to do for these children. Make sure we have a community of people there to support these children, to walk them through these things and not to ostracize them. You're the worst thing that ever happened. This is the worst thing. How can we come together as a community to heal as much as we can, right? And that's what I think is important. And that's how I've been living my life. What can I do every day to atone for what I did, right? I know that the family said they forgave me, but it's something that I still carry. And I want to make sure that what I do until the day I pass away, that I'm showing my children the right way. I'm being honorable to my wife. I'm being honorable to my family, to my friends, and I'm being a part of the teaching and why these things are important. And if we come together collectively as a community, we can all continue to grow and be healthy, in different ways, whether it's financially, whether it's physical, spiritually. But I think if we separate, it's going to be harder for us to really heal, and it shows that animals, when some animals are hurt, they go by their pack and they lay by them to heal until they get better. And I look at that like, as humans, we could do the same thing and continue to, and many people are, but it's something that I'm continuing to learn. And I think it's very important because people have done it with me. And I'm continuing to try to do it with others as well.
Responsibilities do individuals and institutions have to ensure Black Lives Matter at school? What does it look like for them to wrap around and be a community of care, support? Some of the things you said. How do we approach what's not going well, talk about repair, and think about things on a systemic level for our school communities? I'll start with you, Eddie, and then I'll go to Naya and thinking about how do we show Black Lives Matter at school
in
individual ways.
I really appreciate that. And while you was talking, what I was thinking about before I jump into it is that a lot of us want to dismantle a system that's harmful, but then we start mimicking those same habits of the system. And not being just as harmful to folks as the system was. So with that, I would say, if you were someone that care about humanity, it would be vital that we want our children to succeed, to have all the resources they need, support they need to go out into the world to be the best people that they can be. Because when we do that, those same children become people who are being helpful to the ecosystem of change, right? And that ecosystem of restorative justice and transformative justice, right? And through that, if we don't, we know that harm people harm people. And we know that these systems have been so harmful for so many years, and people start mimicking the habits of these systems. People shouldn't have this because I made it. I worked hard. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But what if I don't have boots that have straps? You started with boots. I ain't started with nothing, right? And I'm okay with you struggling because I made it.
Right.
And I tell you that I've been more independent than you ever know. And not realizing that I'm becoming more verbally harmful to you as the system was to you. So I just say, let's create systems. Let's understand why we are important, why our children are important, right? And our children are our future, right? But we can't wait to the future to prepare our children. We have to prepare our children now while they're going to traditional school and while they're home. And what are programs in the community that can be a support to schools, right? That's a single mom and that's a single dad. Yeah, we know that. So what can we do as a community to help that single mom and single dad instead of criticizing, right? What other resources we can put in place while they're at work trying to take care of their children, right? And we have this program here to sustain these young people while they're home until their parents get home. So I think there's a whole lot that we need to do as a community to bring it together. But it's most definitely important that we have all resources that we need available for our children. But the love, the protection is equally important because you can have a lot of resources and these young people not be protected and loved, right? So that's something that's very important, that we love and protect our children and those other things to help them build their life up. So that's what I believe.
The school was them hiding behind a lot of vague language, like all students, all students. And I just wanted, I like when they explicitly name Black students, public statements that acknowledge the anti-Black racism that goes on in schools, these, systems that are tearing our students down. I feel like schools should be putting out clear commitments to equity, speaking on what's going on in the community, and just allowing students to know that they stand in solidarity with them. But, with that, they have to hire, retain, and empower Black educators in these spaces as well.
Thank you. Two things came up for me as you were talking. And earlier in my career, when doing really focused equity work in schools, we found that delineated policies are better than saying all students. When I say these are the categories of students that are being targeted, hurt, harm, that's when we can be like, oh, as an educator, I now know I have the backing. As an admin, I now know I have a framework. Eddie, restorative justice, loving engagement, what does it look like? What's different in our justice systems?
Systems closed. More resources, more community engagement, more community support. And I think it's about being brave, right? And I think that we become so conditioned to what we see, we can't envision nothing different. So I'm not sparing the rod at all. But when you see that you can spare the rod and other things can happen, we can start think different and building different. Right. So when I think about um, a young kid, say a young kid stole a car,
Mm-hmm.
crashed a car. What if we can find some systems that can, okay, we know that he has an interest in cars,
Mm-hmm.
right? Here's what we're going to have him to do. We have an old gentleman or older, elder lady in the community that know about vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to say, listen, we're going to get this young person to learn more about vehicles with this elder. Because this got to be their interest. So we don't have to send them to jail. Let's send them through this process to help them learn and grow and build a trade that can help them or him or her in their future. Right? Now, how can we show him or her, whoever done it, this is how you harm the person that, when you took the car. This is what they wasn't able to do because their car was gone, right? To help them understand. We don't even give young people sweat equity in our communities to feel connected to our communities, right? If we allow them to walk around with us and clean up our communities, guess what they ain't gonna allow people to do? Just to throw trash on the ground, right? But we point the finger at what they do instead of walking with them and help them understand the impact of what they do. But as a community, we're walking together to show you that we can do something different and can support you through this process. So that's the way I see it. Dismantle these systems, show different ways that we can use, programs in the community to heal and to help people, right? And to bring people in proximate to each other. And this is where the growth comes in, right? So that's what I think. Get rid of the systems.
Thank you. Thank
Get
you.
rid of
And
this.
be original. That's what I heard. Get rid of the systems and be original. We don't have the same consequence for everybody because their why is different. And how do we move forward with that individual is different. So thank you for bringing that forward, the notion of individualizing what happens, because that is so anti-systems. Systems aren't good at doing that. So thinking on that same question, Naya, of what does it look like when these schools have restorative and transformative justice? What's different for our schools?
What's different when they move in that space? It becomes more of, why are you doing this? And those type of questions to who is this person beyond what they've done?
Mm-hmm.
And so dwelling in that question and moving from that space of love.
All right, y'all. We're going to end on this final question. And I know that you said a lot of things, and all of them, I hope a teacher, a student, a community member can take into their classroom, can take into their own work environments and think about that. But what's that shift that needs to happen internally in our mindset, in our practice? Eddie, you brought up not mimicking, right? But really being individual and thinking of dismantle a system. And Naya, you brought up the importance of the full complexity of people and changing that in my mindset. So, last nugget, what's one shift that you would suggest for a mindset or a practice that can move us towards that justice that's rooted in care? And either of you can go first when you're ready. What's the mindset or practice you would want to put forward for people?
Um, I think for me, I would like to see more restorative healing practices in schools, period. Not just for the students, but for the teachers.
Mhm.
It's a lot, and you know this, Sam, it's a lot that teachers take on emotionally and mentally while trying to prepare, while seeing kids going through different issues at home that they have to address. So it's not just teachers teaching children, it's teachers trying to heal children, trying to protect children, trying to love on children in ways that allows them to go through that day, to make it through that day. And I think that's very important. We can't leave that out. That teachers, they're humans, right?
Right.
They're going through
That's
things in
so
their
real.
own life, right? Losing people, spouses, children, family members. So it's a lot of things that happen. And I just say, you know, make space for these young people to talk
Mm.
so we can listen to them. And this is a way we can help them heal and understand some of the things that they need throughout this process. Um, it's not cookie cutter when you're dealing with children. You may have saw this child go through this, but this child may be going through the same thing, but for a different reason. Be able to sit and listen to them if you have the time. Being able to recognize, help teachers prepare to recognize when some of these children are dealing with things outside of educational needs, and allow these things to come in space to support. And this is what I think builds the ecosystem up in the school, not just for the student, but also for the teachers as well.
Thank you. Thank you for naming that. I think we talk about restorative practice and often we do focus on the students, and we're missing that opportunity to really engage our staff. Naya, what's the last thing you want to say? What's that shift that you would love in mindset or practice based off your own lived experience would be wonderful for you to uplift? What is different or could be?
The shift that I would like to see is so simple. Honestly, from control to care, from punishment to repair,
Mm-hmm.
um, from compliance to relationship. We've been using the word relationship on the call a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, that's what it is. That's the shift that needs to happen.
Thank you. Thank you. And all of those things can happen if we take the time to listen, if we take the time to check ourselves, recognize how we're showing up in a space, and think about not only loving engagement, but what do we want, the justice that we want in our schools. So thank you both for taking the time to share with me all the little wonderful nuggets. I was like wanting all the quotes, right? Because the reality of it is, this is what we want to put forward. It is justice in our schools, in our communities, and for our students. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.